All right, let's begin with some first few concepts here in Chapter 1. Now, in general, the slides I have that will be on Canvas are set up in such a way that the first slide basically kind of gives the, basically the main title of the chapter. Second slide tells you the chapter. The third slide just kind of tells you the primary topics we're going to address in this particular chapter. So this is Chapter 1. It's easy, it's an intro, and so largely we're just going to be talking about some terms first, and then we're going to go through 8 guideposts for economic thinking, and then we'll finish up with some last few definitions and terms. So this video is going to kind of address the intro topics here. The next video will get to the guideposts. Okay, well, this is an intro to economics course. So what is economics? If you look in our textbook, or pretty much any economics textbooks for that matter, you're going to see a definition that basically goes like this. It is the study of how society allocates its scarce resources to satisfy our unlimited wants. Okay, so we'll talk about scarcity. When we say allocate, this just basically means who gets what, who gets what, right? So that's what that term means, okay? All right, so this is an okay definition, but one of the things that's left out here, and this is why it's kind of good to add something here, is that the choices being made, it's not society, right? It's not like we get up every morning and we have to vote on like what shirt or sweatshirt somebody's going to wear or what somebody's going to eat for breakfast, right? Society has no say on what I eat for breakfast, what I wear, what car I drive. So it's not really how society allocates this, right? So yes, we as society make these choices, but the choices are being made by individuals. The choices are made by individuals. Okay. So really we're studying the choices that individuals make when they're confronted with scarcity. Again, we'll talk about that. But that's really what we're studying here in economics, is how we navigate the economy around us when we deal with scarcity, and we have to make choices. We have to make choices over our time, over our resources, over the things we have, etc. Okay. Now, economics is split into kind of 2 big top-level categories. Microeconomics. So now if you know anything about root words, micro, this means the small or lower level, right? So this is where our focus is on individuals and companies. Right? This is where we're going to be talking about, say, the market for a particular product, right? Or a company producing a particular thing, or workers working in a particular industry, right? This is all microeconomics. Okay, macroeconomics, the focus here is kind of a top level, country level view, right? So this is where we are analyzing the country as a whole. Okay, so a lot of times it's the macroeconomic topics that you kind of hear or read about in the news, right? When people talk about unemployment, inflation, people will talk about recessions or if the economy is doing well. Those are all macroeconomic topics. So those will we'll get to those kind of in some of our later chapters. Okay, so macro is where we really take a top level view of the economy. So no longer looking at individual markets and individual buyers and sellers or workers, we're looking at the whole economy together. So when we get to things like demand, instead of talking about demand for, for loofahs, instead we're talking, in macroeconomics, we're talking about demand for all goods and services in a particular economy. Okay, so macroeconomics is really where we aggregate everything together. Okay. So our focus in the first half of this course is going to be on microeconomics. Focus in the second half is going to be macroeconomics. All right, so where does it all begin? Well, for us, it begins with this class. But for economics, it goes back to Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a Scottish philosopher in the period what's known as the Scottish Enlightenment. And he writes the book, The Wealth of Nations. Okay, he wrote it, so he writes the book in 1776. Now, for many of you, you're thinking, wow, 1776 is a notable year, and why is that? Well, it's because that's when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. It's a momentous year because that's the beginning of the field of economics, and it all goes back to Adam Smith and his work in that book. Now, some of you might be chuckling at this point. 1776 is also when the Revolutionary War started. This Declaration of Independence for the United States. So fine, we in economics will say, okay, maybe that was the bigger event that year, but the second biggest event next to the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence was Adam Smith writing The Wealth of Nations and beginning the field and the study of economics. Okay. So in my definition of economics, I talked about scarcity. So what is scarcity? Right? Scarcity is kind of a big aspect or a big fundamental piece of economics. Right? Scarcity simply means there's not enough to go around. You can't have everything you want at once. Okay? So scarcity means there are not enough resources, right? Stuff, goods, whatever you want to call it. There are not enough resources in our world for us to satisfy every want and desire. Okay? And because of that, we have to make choices, right? So scarcity is different from being poor, right? Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Elon Musk, even though they are fabulously wealthy, and I guess let's not leave out Jeff Bezos, they're ridiculously wealthy, but they have to deal with scarcity, right? They have to make choices, okay? So because we can't have everything we want all at once, we have to make choices, and that's what we mean by scarcity, okay? So, things that are scarce. Well, that's pretty much everything, right? So obviously the most scarce good of all is time, right? We don't get to live forever, and we can't do everything at each exact moment, so we have to make choices with our time. You're choosing to spend time working on your class. That is a wise choice, but you could be doing something else. Could be watching a movie, going out with friends, eating, lots of other different things you could do, and you can't do them all at once, okay? That's what we mean by scarcity. You can't have everything you would ever want at the same time, so we have to make choices over things, right? It's the nature of the world we live in, right? Some people say, right, we live in a fallen world. We have to deal with scarcity. We can't have everything we want, and we can't have everything our way, okay? So time is scarce, money is scarce, resources, clothing, right? Everything you have to make a choice over is scarce. Right? And so that's why over here on the right, I can kind of write in things that are not scarce. Okay. Well, that's not very many things. For the most part, right? Basically air. Right? It's not like I have to make a choice of, do I breathe or do something else? Right? So far, I don't have to make a choice over breathing or not. I don't have to buy my air. Right? I don't have to go to the air company and be like, I'm running out of air here. I need to buy some more air. Please help me. Right? And they tell me, well, it's going to be a quarter. I'm like, shoot, I don't have a quarter. Right? So air is one of those things we really don't have to make choices over. Okay. But pretty much everything else in this world is scarce. Right? So that's what we mean by scarcity. Right? Scarcity is not poverty. Right? Bill Gates has a lot of money, can do a lot of things. But he still has to make choices, right? He still doesn't have an unlimited amount of time. He's not going to live forever. And he still has to make choices over things. Okay? All right. Now, because we have scarcity, right? This is a fundamental aspect of the human condition. We have to ration goods, right? We have to figure out who gets what, right? Everybody can't have everything they want. So we have to figure out who gets different goods and resources. Okay. Now, for the most part, in our economy today, we live in what we would call a market economy. Okay. That basically means that we let individuals make their own choices. Individuals make their own choices. Okay. Now, okay, that's fine. We get to make our own choices. And the way we figure out who gets what is we use prices. Right? So, prices guide our choices. The primary thing that keeps me from buying a yacht is the very high price. I don't have enough resources to afford a yacht, right? So that's how we figure out who gets what, right? The price. So we each make our own choices and make our own choices over the resources we have, and then we choose to buy this, that, or the other thing. That's how we figure out who gets what resources, okay? And so the key thing here in a market economy is prices got our choices, and you have to ask yourself, can you afford the good? Can you afford the good? And do you want the good? Or the money? Right? So you have money, you can buy something, and a lot of times you have to make a choice. Is what you're going to buy worth the money you would give up to get the good? Okay. There's other ways we could do it, right? In a communist society, right? The rationing is basically done by the government. The government decides who gets what, right? We could also do random assignment, right? Which would be maybe more fair, but then it might not make so much sense, right? Because all of a sudden one day you get a Ferrari, but no food. You're like, man, I'm hungry. I'd sure like to sell this Ferrari to get some food, right? And so one of the issues why we don't like that is it ends up turning into a market economy anyway, because people then turn around and sell the goods, right? A lot of times most people are generally not big fans of communism because the rationing is done by the government, right? You don't get to make those choices. You don't get to be free and make those choices yourself, okay? We could also do rationing with lines, right? You could wait in line to get stuff. But as we know, that's a big waste of time, right? And time is our most precious resource, right? So for the most part, even when people try different types of systems, we always end up just kind of coming back to a market type system, which is exchange between buyer and seller guided by prices, okay?